Let's talk Tanya for the 20th of Sivan of a leap year. Yesterday, we finished chapter 6 of Shar Yichud V'Emunah, and with that, we finished the basics of God's unity. We already understand how, despite the fact that God created this universe and all the worlds, none of this constitutes a contradiction to A-donai Movadai, the idea of God's absolute oneness and the fact that there is nothing other than Him. Now that we have the basics down, we're ready to go back to the introductory lines of Shar Yichud V'Emunah, where the Alter Rebbe says that the purpose of these chapters is lohaven ma'at mezeir, that we should understand just a little bit that which it says in the Zohar, that Shema Yisrael, the verse Shema Yisrael, is Yichuda Ilah, is the higher level of unity, and Baruch Shem Kved Malchusay Elam Bod, which is the line that we say after Shema Yisrael, is Yichuda Tata, is the lower level of unity. What is the higher level of unity and the lower level of unity? The Shema expresses God's unity in a very clear way, and very specifically in the word Echad. Shema Yisrael, hear O Israel, Hashem Echad, God is one. The Kabbalists tell us that the concluding word of the Baruch Shem, which is Va'ed, which literally translates as forever, is also an expression of God's unity and actually has the same meaning as the word Echad. How is that? Because already in chapter 1 of Shar Yichud V'Emunah, we learned about a concept called Chilufim, which means that different letters can be exchanged for other letters that are of a similar grouping. So the Aleph of Echad becomes the Vav of Va'ed. Why is that? Because there's a grouping of 4 letters, Aleph, Hey, Vav, and Yud. They are vowel letters, and all of them are interchangeable with each other. The Ches of Echad becomes the Ayin of Va'ed, because there's another grouping of 4 letters, the Aleph, the Ches, the Hey, and the Ayin. These are all guttural letters. We say them using our throat, also interchangeable. So the Aleph becomes the Vav, the Ches becomes the Ayin, and obviously the Dalid of the Echad becomes the Dalid of Va'ed. But interestingly, it's not really the same Dalid. If you ever looked in a mezuzah or in a Sefer Torah, you'll see that the Dalid of Echad is a large Dalid, as opposed to the Dalid of Va'ed is a smaller Dalid. So every single one of these letters undergoes a change. So what do we have over here? In the Shema, we have the Echad in a very revealed and overt way. That is Yichuda Ilah, that is the higher level of God's unity, whatever that means. Obviously, we have to explain that. And then we have the same concept in Va'ed. It is also God's unity. You know, this is an interesting case where it doesn't look like a duck, it doesn't swim like a duck, it doesn't quack like a duck, but it is a duck. It doesn't look like Echad, but it is Echad. It is also God's unity, but a lower level of God's unity, a more concealed level of God's unity. What does that mean? So, tomorrow we're going to start explaining what is Yichud Ilah, the higher level of unity. The day after we'll talk about Yichud Tata, the lower level of unity. But first we have to introduce one idea. And that is that up until now we've been talking about 2 of God's names, Havaya and Elokim. Havaya, which is God's power of chesed, of greatness, of creation. Gevura, which is God's power of concealment. But today we're going to be introduced to another name of God, which is the name Aleph Dalid Nun Yud, which we're not going to pronounce over here. And because we don't pronounce God's name, so in Chassidus, when we talk about this name, we call it the name of A-donai. This name, the name of A-donai, which comes from the root A-donai, which means to be the master or the ruler, the sovereign. This represents God's malchus, God's kingship. Ultimately, all of creation, it might be originally sourced, or it is using and utilizing the energies of Havaya and Elokim. But actual creation is a result of the name of A-donai, or God's kingship. Why do we exist? Because God wants to be a king. And in order to be a king, you have to have subjects. And subjects, by definition, are entities that are outside of you. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, you can't even be a king over your own children. They're too close to you. You can't even be a king if you only have ministers. You need simple people. You need people who are independent entities. And it is because of God's desire to be a king that ultimately that's where creation comes from. How does this connect to the higher level of unity and the lower level of unity? That we will find out in the Tanya of the following 2 days.